Now let's talk about tools. Obviously, we came up with ideas. I also explained you like principles of cinematography, how to use cameras, how to use lenses, and all that stuff. But now, obviously, unless you know your tools, it would be impossible to put all this stuff together. That's why when you work on movies, uh, you can you basically have to use quite a lot of tools, and that's why I think it's very important to understand which tools are better at certain periods or at certain like stages of the workflow, and where you can expand it and add different other tools. So we will start simple. We'll start with 2D tools. I love 2D tools because they're simple, they're straightforward, they're less of technology involved because it's mainly like about your ability uh, to draw and more about how well you know basic and fundamentals. Because as a tool like painting, which we use Photoshop, we use iPad, doesn't matter. The tool itself quite straightforward. It's less complicated than 3D tools, and that allows you to do stuff very very quickly. And this is where I see a lot of people, especially a lot of artists these days, they kind of ignoring this tool, diving straight into 3D, which is totally understandable. You can do amazing magic with 3D. But I guess if you want to be a complete artist and you want to be able to work at different stages of the project, uh, knowing how to draw and knowing how to use 2D tools is like essential thing. Uh, yeah, obviously with 2D, I felt like the point where 2D stagnates and becomes very difficult to use is where you have very complex perspective, is where you constantly trying to change your camera angles, all those stuff. This is where 2D, obviously, because everything has to be done manually, it falls short, right? This is where 3D becomes very handy. With 3D, you can set up one scene and then you can rotate your camera. You get lighting for free, you get perspective for free, you get cameras for free. So kind of like looks like an amazing thing. But obviously, the problem with 3D, in order to do all this stuff, first you gotta build this 3D geometry, and that's the most time consuming and probably not the most kind of fun stuff to do. This is where like I felt 3D has a very slow build up, right? It's like you start doing something and it picks up, and then you refine, and then you move forward. But I always felt like there should be something like compromising. This is where I started using like Blender, which is 2.5D, where you can draw like your objects, and then you can convert them into like 2.5D drawings. I'm gonna explain this later in the week, probably the third week. For this week, we're gonna stay only in 2D, but just to show you the variety of tools I would love to introduce to you. And obviously, the ultimate one would be VR, which is where we actually using drawing abilities to sculpt in 3D space, and you can do amazing, very kind of gestural, very, very, very strong work. But we're gonna go back and we're gonna start from 2D. This week, I fully want us to concentrate on 2D tools, even if some of you go like, I'm a 3D guy, I don't care. If you came to this course, you came here to learn something, and I believe learning and understanding how to sketch and how to draw is essential. You don't need to be Craig Mullins or Jamie Jones or Kim Jong-gi, but you need to be able to do some rough sketches, because this is how you start. You have your ideas in your head and you start dropping them on the paper or on the canvas to come up with something cool. So I'm gonna show you a couple of examples I did working on film called Jurassic World. So basically these are very quick sketches just to show ideas. And another very interesting thing I can show you here. I have this little program, and you can basically get pretty much different versions of it. This is the guy called Hourglass. So what I do with Hourglass, I put the time limits. For example, this sketches, I would put 5 minute time limit, and I would start it. So why would I do that? Why, like, it's not an army. Why would I do that? Because I think, especially as an artist, you have only limited amount of time to focus on something, right? And that's why when doing 5 limit sketches, I want to focus on what really does matter. And here it is story, right? I'm not getting distracted by different like simple, not simple, like different unimportant things in the compositions. I just want to kind of illustrate this story, and this is where, for example, we end up having stuff like this, right? It's very quick, it's very fast, and allows me to concentrate on what really matters. Again, it is storytelling. It's the moment we are trying to illustrate. And some of them, as I showed you in the previous week, they get and they dictate how the final frame is gonna look like, for example. And also they serve you as a guide for your like more refined artwork. For example, this is where I had this idea where one of the lava chunks hits, like this dinosaur is just about to kind of bite this gyrosphere, and the huge lava chunk hits the dinosaur. They liked it and they said, hey, can we refine it? So then I started doing like photo bashing, 3D. From here it doesn't matter, like you see it's like a little bit of photo bashing, a little bit of 3D, and then you combine it and create much more finished, like much more polished artwork. And then they give you feedback, and then this is the final concept. But it was clear to see how you progress, how you move from starting from very simple, having just idea in your mind, and then you just like quickly rough out those things. And usually they would tell you like, okay, in this case we wanted to kind of see the stampede uh, moment when they had to rush and they had to run away from lava, a volcano eruption behind them. Another example here. So it's basically the brief here was to save the dinosaurs, and obviously I had to come up with different ideas how to make it happen. And first what I do, remember we talked about the scene, so I'm trying to come up with this scene in my mind, and this is not necessarily something that I show to art director or to director. I just have to form this scene in my mind before I even start doing something, correct? So I did a couple of sketches where I tried to illustrate that, and after that I had that, basically I had the scene with them being on a motorcycle and there is this like valley and they are trying to save the dinosaurs somehow. And this is how I showed the way they could potentially save them. And you can see like the tool I'm using, it's almost like I'm going into line drawing, right? It's last value sketches. What I'm trying to do here is quickly block out all these elements to show the story. It's not exactly storyboarding, because storyboarding is more like, I guess, rough. It's just lines. Here it's more just line drawing, getting different shots, getting different ideas. And then as you can see what they do, they drop the dynamite explodes, and then you have all those like rocks falling over. And yeah, this is a top view, them escaping, and then the lava behind them. And then basically this avalanche of stones forms this kind of natural dam, and you see all the lava pouring out, and that's the top view, and there's the motorcycle. So it was done very quickly, maybe like a couple of hours, maybe an hour, I don't know, definitely not an hour, maybe a couple of hours, me playing with different things. But it gave a clear idea how this sequence is gonna look like. So our goal for this week would be to come up with this sequence, and I will force you to use primitive tools. We're not allowed to use any 3D. We're gonna stay within just 2D realm, trying to figure out who can draw and who needs to spend more time on that stuff. It is very important, and hopefully guys you can level up yourself and add a very powerful tool in your arsenal, which is quick sketching, quick ideation. And then from here you can like, this is more advanced stuff when you use a little bit of photo bashing, again like expressing the idea, kind of coming up with the idea. And the idea here was that the guy, they are in danger, they need to escape, and the guy sees this rolled over old Jurassic Park vehicle, and then he sees the door and he goes like, hey, we can slide. So they sit on top of the door and they just slide on the, because it's all ash, like covered with ash around them and lava behind them, and then this is how they escape. So I basically showed you like the real work I've done on the movies, and showed you how it is important to start very rough. Literally, like, it's important to start from basic stuff, just like 2D, just doing very quick stuff so we can figure out like the proportions in the frame, the camera angles, and all this stuff. And of course, as it gets complicated, we're gonna use much more refined tools, and then we're gonna swap to 3D, and everything will be really, really nice. But for this week, our tool will be just 2D, and it's gonna be very rough sketches. I want to see how well you can work under very tight deadlines, and this is where you will have to set up the timer, and the timer depends on you. It could be an hour, it could be half an hour, it could be 20 minutes, depends on how fast you do. But I would love to see how you rough out those, because once you rough out those ideas, it's pretty straightforward from there. First, you can show that to art director and get a feedback, or director, depending on how refined it is. And then it just takes you time. They give you feedback, and if they see that that's the right thing to do, they just leave you alone, and then you just refine, and then you just make it look good. The rest is just a matter of time. But what is important, to come up with those really, really rough sketches. So yeah, let's get started. I'm gonna show you how I do a couple of those, and then I will be enjoying and seeing how you guys can deal with that.